Second World War was the most devastating conflict in human history. In the 6 years between 1939 and 1945, young men from all corners of the globe were thrown into some of the most horrific conditions imaginable. The conflict changed almost every aspect of society, and even over half a century later was still a common setting in books, films, and video games. Gaming's obsession with the Second World War truly peaked in the early to mid-2000s with the rise in popularity of the first-person shooter genre. Releases such as Medal of Honor, Battlefield 1942, and the original Call of Duty became the biggest sellers at the time. However, while these games are still remembered as classics, no game before or since has been able to truly capture the horrors of the conflict quite like Call of Duty World at War. Developed by Treyarch and published by Activision in November 2008, World at War was a follow-up to 2007's incredibly successful Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. The game ran on an improved version of Modern Warfare's engine, with several improvements made to the physics model, allowing for the addition of destructible environments and dismemberment. One of the key challenges that faced Treyarch was the oversaturation of World War II games by the late 2000s. The majority of games in the genre had mostly become a slideshow, allowing players to reenact scenes from Saving Private Ryan. Storming the beaches of Normandy with your brothers in arms, heroically liberating the people of Europe from the grasp of Nazi oppression, becoming a hero who defied the odds and triumphed adversity. There are only so many ways that you can tell the same story, and the issue with basing a game around real historical events is that there's little wiggle room for innovative storytelling. Combined with the fact that this was going to be the fourth mainline COD game to be set during the Second World War in 5 years, Treyarch knew that they were going to have to bring a new perspective to the conflict. What really made this game stand out was the horrific atmosphere that it brought to its campaign, through its story and gameplay. They wanted to show you just how terrifying this war was for the men who fought in it, from all sides of the conflict. It wasn't just the blood and gore that made this game particularly brutal. The atmosphere that Treyarch created meant that no matter where you were in a level, you always felt under threat, be that from enemy fire, grenades, or ambushes. There is a constant theme of despair in the game, with many levels feeling as though they're set during the end of the world. The player is constantly bombarded by a barrage of gunfire, explosions, and screaming, and the game's soundtrack does an excellent job of highlighting the rapid pace of each level. Its quick tempo with use of heavy drums mirrors the chaos on the battlefield. This causes many levels to feel chaotic, especially in the American campaign, giving players a feeling that they are being suffocated in many sections. The two campaigns of World at War had you participating in the truly brutal Pacific Theatre, experiencing the fanatical guerrilla fighting of the Japanese Imperial Army, and watching the annihilation of Eastern Europe by the all-conquering Nazis, and later contributing to it as the Russians.
It's time.
Good luck, all of you.
This is it, Miller.
Okay, keep it together or we'll get through this in 3 days.
There they go.
Bastards ain't gonna know what hit them.
Navy's been bombing the hell out of the island for 2 days straight. Miller, we hit any resistance on the beach, you get on that radio and call for immediate missile support.
Don't think twice.
The war in the Pacific included some of the most hard-fought battles of the war. For years prior, the Japanese Empire had been expanding through Southeast Asia. The United States did little to prevent this, due to an original unwillingness to go to war. However, after the attacks on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States had no choice other than to declare all-out war on Japan. The following years would entail a costly island-hopping campaign, where the US would slowly drive the Japanese back into their home territory. These battles were brutal, and the cost of victory for the US was almost as great as the cost of defeat for the Japanese. World at War was the first Call of Duty game to feature a campaign set in the Pacific Theatre. The sacrificial tactics the Japanese used are on full display in World at War's gameplay. Constant ambushes from spider holes, tall grass and trees mean that most of the time you don't even know where you're being shot at from. This can often lead the player to spraying bullets in the general direction of the enemy in a vain attempt to keep them at bay. Many Japanese troopers will perform a suicidal banzai charge at the player and their squad mates. The only way to counter these is to kill them from afar or to successfully perform a quick-time event. These mirrored the real-life tactics of the Japanese. They knew they couldn't beat the US through brute force. They needed to make them bleed for every island, beach and cave they took if there were any chance of winning the war.
You think because you said nothing, you are strong? 貴様は強くない。強情なやつめ。
Don't tell him a fucking thing.
米兵どもはみんなこうなのか。
The campaign's opening highlights this brutality. Instead of a tutorial, the player is thrown into the deep end by being forced to watch an ally have their throat slit by a Japanese interrogator. Even after being rescued by your team, you still have to make your way through multiple enemy ambushes in order to reach your objective. This opening level does an excellent job at showing the player just how different the fighting style of the Japanese will be to anything that they have experienced in previous titles. Treyarch are able to subvert the audience's expectation again in the mission Little Resistance. What starts out as a tropical version of the D-Day landing quickly descends into hell, with the player having to call in a rocket barrage just so the Allied forces can make it to the beach. While these types of beach landing scenes have been done in other games many times before, World at War forces you to look at the consequences of your actions. As you continue to storm up the beach, you walk amongst the charred remains of your foes, many of whom are still clinging to life. This makes the player ponder whether some rock in the middle of the ocean is really worth all of this carnage. At the conclusion of Little Resistance, your squad commander Sergeant Sullivan is killed in a sneak attack. This helps highlight to the player that no one is safe, and that if you drop your guard for even a second, it could lead to your death. In the following missions, leadership of the squad falls to newly promoted Sergeant Roebuck, voiced by Kiefer Sutherland. Roebuck does not have as lasting an impact on the American campaign as Sergeant Reznov does on the Russian, nor is Sutherland's performance one that stands out. However, he does still perform a role giving the player orders during missions and narrating pre-mission cutscenes.
Everything that was asked of us, we've done. Every night we lay in a filthy foxhole praying the enemy won't slit our throats. Every day was spent crawling through the mud and the dirt while bullets whistle all around.
As the story progresses, the fighting becomes more and more intense, with Marines being forced into close combat as the Japanese begin using guerrilla tactics against them. Missions such as Burn 'Em Out and Relentless are examples of how Japanese troops were willing to die for every inch of territory. This is a common theme throughout the American campaign. As the Japanese continue to dig in, the Americans are forced to use more and more deadly weapons against them. Napalm, flamethrowers, bombers and tanks result in some horrifying scenes. The true human cost of the war becomes more and more apparent. The American campaign also includes a mission where the player is a gunner on a US Navy Black Cat. This mission involves the player using multiple turrets to destroy enemy naval ships and fend off Japanese Zeros. This mission allowed Treyarch to further display the desperation of Japanese forces by showing kamikaze attacks on US warships. Black Cats was likely inspired by the well-known mission Death from Above in COD 4 Modern Warfare. However, the key difference is, in that mission the player is never really threatened by forces on the ground. Whereas here, if they do not shoot down the enemy planes quickly enough, they will be killed, causing a much greater sense of tension in the mission. Even up here, you are not safe. This leads into another of the common themes of the American campaign, the exhaustion of war that would have been felt by the Marines. The physical and mental toll would have been unimaginable, and this can be felt through dialogue heard from squad mates in later missions of the campaign.
2,
You leaving?
push ahead and take Shuri Castle.
But we're running on empty here.
You'll have a supply drop in the morning.
Tomorrow? How the hell are we supposed to hold out till tomorrow? This is bullshit. You hear this, Sarge? We ain't getting shit till tomorrow morning.
Intel says Shuri Castle is mostly deserted. Look on the bright side. After this, you boys will probably get relieved and be on the road.
Yeah? That's what we thought after Peleliu.
In the last mission of the campaign, the key message from Sergeant Roebuck is that once the mission to secure Shuri Castle is complete, the unit will be getting sent home. This is something that you are constantly being reminded of during the mission. This is one last push. This is almost over. However, this is by no means an easy battle, with some of the toughest fighting in the entire campaign. After reaching the main courtyard, you encounter a group of Japanese soldiers surrendering. As Roebuck and your squad mate Private Polanski begin to apprehend them, they are attacked, forcing you to choose which one to save. Once you've made your choice, you are soon overrun by enemy forces, being forced to hold the line until air support takes them out at the last minute. The campaign ends on a sober note. It's over. You have won, but at what cost?
Our bullets whistle all around. This is the enemy's last stand. When we take Shuri Castle, we go home. All of us.
This place once echoed with conversations of friends and lovers. No longer. Mark my words, comrade. One day things will change. We will take the fight to their land, to their people, to their blood.
The opening of the Russian campaign is one of the most impactful moments in the entire game. You awaken in a fountain, close to death, having narrowly avoided being part of a massacre in the main square of the city of Stalingrad. You watch on helplessly as your wounded comrades are mercilessly killed by a German soldier, with countless bombers flying over your head. It's an image of hopelessness, an image of hell. In the fountain, you meet Sergeant Reznov, a fellow Red Army soldier who needs your help in avenging your comrades by assassinating the Nazi commander, General Amsel. Reznov plays a similar role as Sergeant Roebuck in the American campaign, however is easily the most impactful character in the game, largely due to his brilliant portrayal by Gary Oldman. The opening mission Vendetta is also one of the game's most memorable. With the player and Reznov making their way through the ruined streets of Stalingrad, the initial silence in the early stages of the mission also allows the player to become engrossed in the devastation the city has suffered and fueling a hatred for the Nazis. Much of the design of Vendetta takes inspiration from the 2001 film Enemy at the Gates, with the opening fountain scene being a direct homage to the film.
Which one do you think I should aim at first? You should wait first. Till this explosion.
The mission's sniper duel also takes inspiration from the film, with the player needing to identify the target's location in a building by looking out for the flash of his scope. These are brilliantly tense moments that truly encapsulate the fine line between life and death. Even after you successfully take down your target, you are still in danger after patrols heard your shots, forcing you and Reznov to quickly flee, only to be forced to crawl for a burning building. After rejoining your comrades, you are able to make your way to the location of your target. The assassination is difficult due to the chaos on the battlefield below, and you are forced to sacrifice your comrades in order to avoid giving away your position. However, with the techniques given to you by Reznov early in the level, you are successful, but your war is far from over. I've talked a lot about just the first mission because it is so important to the rest of the story, as it gives the player context of what these characters have gone through. It will help them understand the decisions many of them make later on in the game's story. In the following missions, you move forward in time to when the Red Army are beginning to close in on Berlin. The cruelty and destruction brought by the Germans in Stalingrad is matched, if not exceeded, by the Red Army. Reznov shows no sympathy for the Germans and actively encourages the player to shoot injured soldiers and to burn crops.
Our tanks are ready to smash this line and... Turn up! I am not hearing gunshots!
There is no point, Sergeant. They are already bleeding to death.
Then maybe our friend will help them bleed faster.
He's not alone, as many Russian troopers now share a bitter hatred of all Germans, and share a collective desire to gain vengeance. The tables truly have turned, and now the Russians are an unstoppable tidal wave washing over Europe. Progressing into Berlin, World at War is able to present the true horrors of the closing chapters of the Second World War. The Russians showed no mercy as they continued to push into the city, with the player an active participant in the destruction. Many games often put the player in a position of weakness to allow them to feel a sense of accomplishment when they've overcome all odds. World at War puts you in one of the largest fighting forces the world has ever seen. You're not fighting desperately to end the Nazi regime, its death is already assured at this point. Nothing you do will change that. These missions are purely to enact revenge for you and your comrades. The mission Eviction is probably the best example of this, as you are tasked with clearing out German troops from surrounding rubble in Berlin. This is where the context from Vendetta is so important. Knowing what many of these soldiers would have gone through allows the player to understand their point of view, and why they feel the execution of a prisoner of war isn't murder, but justice.
Wait! He may help. Help us! He can die for us! Muda! This is not war! This is murder!
This is how you end a war, Colonel!
This is madness!
Get inside!
Many of the themes covered in the later missions are reminiscent of the 2004 film Downfall, which is a dramatic retelling of the fall of the Third Reich. These feelings of hopelessness from the German perspective is fully on display in these final missions. The evil that was the Nazi regime is crashing down around the player. Downfall was also the name of the final mission of the campaign. During the mission, you and your comrades clear out the final bastion of German resistance inside the German parliament building, the Reichstag. The musical score for this level is the best in the entire game, with eerie chants and blistering Wolfenstein-esque heavy metal being combined to make the player feel as though they are fighting through one of the lower levels of hell. Crumbled remains of the once mighty Nazi regime surround you as you fight the last remnants of the previously invincible German war machine. Even the design of many German soldiers changes in this level to show many of the troops being forced to fight despite their injuries. You are not fighting soldiers anymore. You are fighting the husks of men whose only purpose left is to die for their fallen Führer. Making your way to the roof, you finish off the last of the resistance. You are so close to ending the fight, so close to avenging your fallen comrades. All that is left is for you to fly the Soviet flag above the symbol of Nazi strength.
You can make it, my friend. You always survive. The honor should be yours.
You and your friend rejoice as your victory is complete. This seems as though it may be a hero's ending, that peace may finally reign. But as many students of history know, this is the moment where the conquered became the conquerors. The campaign ends with a film reel of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and a speech from US General Douglas MacArthur.
It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. Of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish of freedom, tolerance, and justice.
And a chilling reminder of the true cost of the conflict. Call of Duty World at War is still one of the most unique retellings of the battles of the Second World War, and 12 years later is still able to be impactful by giving players a glimpse of the horrors experienced by those who fought in it.